I'm Simon Wingate. I'm the Channel Director for Direct Employers at read.co.uk. So my role is around our strategy for organisations like yourselves to see how we can best engage with you. I'm going to be doing quite a lot of the talking. Lydia, my colleague next to me, who I'll introduce properly in a little bit, is going to take you through some insights from graduates, which should be particularly interesting to you. So a bit of a quick whiz through. The three things we're going to be talking about is a bit around the recruitment marketplace. We're going to talk around attracting graduates. So from an employer's perspective, what are the things that candidates have told us that they look for in an employer? And also about becoming an employer of choice. How can you position yourselves best to have the best impact on potential employees within your business? But quick potted history. So this is the first branch of Reed. You will probably know Reed, I would hope. You've heard the name. This is the first branch of Reed in Hounslow in West London in 1960. So Reed was obviously traditionally just a recruitment agency business. And for a number of years, that's how it existed and expanded. And in 1995, we launched this exceptional-looking website, which is what we refer to as version 1. So this is the first ever version of read.co.uk. At this point, read.co.uk was the website of the Reed recruitment business, so consultants would go on here and try and attract candidates. Unfortunately, things have moved on quite a lot from that. And this is what read.co.uk now looks like. So while we're owned by the same people as the recruitment agency, we're a separate business. So interesting enough, the recruitment agency are one of our customers, which is quite a nice, interesting relationship to have. But we're a separate entity, so we are the UK's #1 job site and Britain's favourite recruiter. So hopefully you've seen this ad campaign and you know who we are. So that's a little bit about who we are and hopefully why we're positioned nicely to talk to you about this, because we've got 250,000 jobs on our website at any given time, 20,000 different businesses using us at any given time. So I guess a lot of the data we have will certainly, I would hope, resonate with you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a bit about the graduate recruitment marketplace. So just some stats. So this is from UCAS. So last year, 647,000 undergraduates enrolled. So that's just the, I guess that's the total size of the market in terms of graduates who will be coming out the other end in sort of 3 to 4 years' time, depending on what degrees they're doing. So graduates are still going to university, but we know that there's a challenge around the numbers that are going and potentially the disciplines that they're going to study. On read.co.uk last year, we had 262,000 candidates registered for the first time for graduate vacancies or roles which are suitable for graduates. So these are potentially people who have come out of university in the last year or maybe the last couple of years, but are looking for graduate roles. So 262,000. And interesting enough, in the last 4 weeks, about 80% of these have been on read.co.uk within their account. So it's a really active audience, which is good news if you're looking to recruit. In terms of graduate vacancies, so we had, what did we say, 262,000 graduates. We had in the last year 194,000 vacancies advertised for graduates on read.co.uk. So we've actually got more graduates or people looking for graduate jobs than we potentially did graduate vacancies last year, which might maybe challenge some of the stuff that we've talked around today. But what we know is that we do have candidates on our site who are looking for graduate vacancies, so there is an opportunity for recruiting. And some interesting stuff. So what are graduates looking for when they come to read.co.uk? So graduates who came to read.co.uk and registered last year, when they complete their profile, they sort of say, this is the role that I'm looking for, the industry, and this is the salary that I'm after. And last year, graduates were looking for just over £29,000 per annum in terms of salary. Now, this has actually moved on quite a lot. 5 years ago, when we probably first asked this statistic, it was £20,000 or £21,000. So I guess graduates' requirements or views on what they're worth has grown exponentially in the last few years. Interestingly enough, on the vacancies that we actually had advertised, the average salary was slightly lower. So if you aggregate the whole thing, the average salary that we had on our site was marginally less than the average graduate was expecting. So read into that what you will. But what we do know is that there's quite a variation between different candidates and different roles in different market sectors. So as an example, best paying graduate jobs. Now, again, the caveat here is that these are, particularly for something like accountancy qualified, this might be a candidate who has left university and has then studied for a professional qualification. But accountancy qualified was the highest at 48,000. So this is someone who's come out of university and may have just done their qualification, so maybe 3 to 5 years post-graduation. But these are the top 5, accountancy qualified, purchasing, construction and property, strategy and consultancy, maybe some of the big, we talked a little bit earlier on this morning around some of the kind of the view of traditional big graduate recruiters might fit into the accountancy qualified and potentially strategy and consultancy. And actually in IT and telecoms, with IT skills become more sought after, potentially scarcer, there's been an increase in terms of the salary paid and sought for IT jobs in the last 12 months. In terms of jobs available, education is the biggest sector in terms of the number of jobs that were added in the last 12 months, followed by recruitment consultancy and sales. So people like me, when I came out of university, didn't know what I wanted to do. I fell into a sales role, so I would have been in kind of category 3, I guess. Graduate training and internships, interesting enough. So, and then admin, secretarial and PA. So I guess with lots of things happening within the market in the next 12 months, it'll be interesting to see how apprenticeships, as an obvious one, rank in 12 months' time. But that's kind of how graduate jobs were looking on read.co.uk last year. And in terms of availability, this is kind of new candidate registrations from that 262,000 candidates we talked around earlier on. Engineering, we had most new candidates register for vacancies within engineering last year, followed by education, admin and secretarial and so on. So we talked in the previous slide, fortunately, some of the jobs that were available do marry up with the candidates who are on the site looking for jobs. So there's some good news there. But what it does potentially talk around in certain market sectors is vacancies and competition for candidates in certain markets is absolutely key to, I guess, well, as you guys will know much better than me, the key to one of the challenges for any graduate employer. So we did a survey of our graduates. We asked them a number of questions. Firstly, why did you go to university? So these might not be hugely surprising, but funnily enough, the first one was the reason they went to university was benefit my career prospects. So they see a direct correlation between going to university and the opportunity that they have in employment further down the line, and absolutely talks around some of the stuff which we heard from the REC earlier around the likelihood of people going to university potentially having greater career prospects. So again, not enormously surprising. The second was, they said, a personal interest in the subject. So I don't know necessarily what I want to do when I'm a grown-up. So what I'll do at university is do something which interests me. So I did English literature, and I think Lydia did politics, is that right? So I certainly had no necessary ambitions to become a teacher. Sorry for the people from Teach First. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I did a subject which was interesting to me. And the fact that I only had 6 hours of lectures a week was also a bonus. But anyway, so that's number 2. And number 3 was it was essential to my preferred career. So naturally, if someone is looking to become a doctor, they were aware enough to kind of think, well, I probably need to do a degree which is related to medicine, law being an obvious one, but very vocational qualifications or vocational roles they were looking to do in future. Obviously, they applied for the right course, we would hope, there. So those are the 3 things which they said were the real drivers for them going to university. So we also asked them about how they go about finding these opportunities. If they're going to find a graduate role, what are the things that they do? Now, maybe unsurprisingly for someone who comes from read.co.uk, 51% said that they went to a job board first, which is no enormous surprise. There's a big opportunity online to go and find vacancies, and certainly users of a job site, I would have hoped, would have said that they would have gone to a job board first. But the great news is that with lots of jobs on job sites like read.co.uk, that's the place where a lot of them are going. But there is a kind of diversity around this as well, so it's not just job sites. So 14% said the first place they went was Google and looked for graduate jobs in whatever discipline, or maybe just graduate jobs, or just jobs, who knows. But 14% they said they went to Google first. 10% went to the job centre. 9% went to a company website. So in these instances, these are people who maybe know the end employer or a kind of cohort of end employers that they're looking to go and work for, and went directly to their website to look for opportunities, which again talks around the importance of, if you have graduate programs or roles which are key to graduates, the opportunity that you have there to really sell the benefits of working for you as a graduate employee. But company websites ranked reasonably highly compared to some of the others. Recruitment consultancies was 6%. And interesting enough, social media was only 4%. So I guess only 4% in terms of it's not huge compared to some of the others. But actually, I would anticipate that in the next couple of years, if we ran these stats again, you would see that changing. So social media is an important part, nevertheless, of the things that graduates do to go and look for jobs. And why do they do that? Why do they go to social media? Well, the first reason is, again, following target employers. So again, there's an awareness from a lot of graduates that these are the sorts of organisations I want to go and work for. So they will go onto social media, Facebook or wherever, and follow what's going on at their particular target employer. Naturally, they go onto social media potentially to apply for jobs, to improve their profile. They also go onto social media to talk about their networks, to tell their networks what they want. It might be that they're saying, I'm looking for a role here. Does anyone know who's hiring, or can anyone recommend someone? But they're using social media as a way of, maybe unsurprisingly, networking with their peers as an opportunity to then go and find employment in the end. And also direct messaging employers. So maybe they've gone onto their website, they've followed them on social media, but they're going onto social media pages that companies are hosting, and they're direct messaging employers about vacancies or opportunities that they may potentially have. So social is a really important part of this. So, moving on. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? No. Okay, I don't think there's anyone from PwC here, so I feel quite safe to talk about this. This is a guy called Oliver Alcock, and I won't talk about him in too much detail, but he was a media sensation last year. He hit the headlines because he worked for PwC in a graduate role, and he left. And there was some conjecture in the media about why he left, but he left and he wrote a letter to an email to his colleagues to say why he wasn't that keen on PwC at that particular time. I'm not saying this is representative of what it's work at PwC, but this is the story. But what he talked around really was about the reasons he didn't like working there. Okay, so it interrupted with his social life. It got in the way of him playing FIFA, various other things. But he was reasonably negative about the experience he'd had there. But one of the things he did say was that the experience that he was sold as a potential graduate employee was very different to the experience that he experienced once he started working there. So there may be something in that. This is how some of the media picked it up: Telegraph, the Mail, Financial Times. Moaning millennials let down their generation, said the Financial Times. So I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any of this stuff, but I guess the reason that I'm mentioning it is actually the experience this graduate got in this particular business became news around the UK. But as I say, for me, not making any criticism of the organisation itself, what was quite interesting was that there was a clear disconnect between the expectations that this employee had and the experience that they eventually got. So I think there's something in here about making sure that we are clear with people when they start in any organisation about what the expectations of their role are. But I'll let you look up this guy's name and read some of the news articles about him. Anyway, moving on. So I've mentioned one of these four, but these four organisations we talked around earlier on, some of the very typical big graduate recruiters, are actually doing an awful lot to change the way that they are recruiting graduates. Some of them are doing very, very innovative things to move away from the traditional long application form, going from top 5 universities, particular disciplines, particular high schools, certain education, colleges and what have you. So some of the things that these and other organisations are doing are quite interesting. So they're changing the way that they target particular graduate talent. So the first is looking at blind CVs and applications, so trying to remove any potential bias that they have in the recruitment process. They're looking at different assessments, so rather than elongating the process, they're looking to move everything within a particular small assessment centre. And one of the ladies we were talking to earlier on here was talking about in her organisation actually what they're doing to streamline the process. They're also removing academic kind of qualifiers, so again the qualifications necessarily. So there's lots of work going on in particularly big graduate recruiters to do things very differently. And actually what they're finding is lots of impact in time to hire, cost per hire, also length of service. So there's some real kind of really positive outputs coming on alongside some of these changes. So we also then kind of in a separate survey asked 250 organisations about the way that they work, the way that they've changed their processes. So 38% of the customers that we surveyed said they're now using different interviewing tools, particularly things like more flexible, more user-friendly interfaces. So Skype, video interviews, rather than just relying on really long forms and arduous recruitment processes in an office sat in front of someone. So people are changing, adapting their methods to suit a different market. 22% they've said they've used personality tests at some stage in terms of shortlisting and then onboarding. But 22% said they haven't trialled any of these methods yet. Again, I would anticipate that the percentage from that 38% will grow in the future years, and certainly I would imagine that more organisations will be more tempted to try different recruitment methods in time. Okay, so I guess another statistic. So 80% of those 250 organisations said that they've found it more challenging to hire graduates in 2016 than in previous years. So some of this is changing behaviour and changing expectations for graduates, but interesting that they're finding it more difficult, so they're having to find more innovative approaches to recruit the right talent for their organisations. Okay, so I'm going to segue over and introduce Lydia. So Lydia has been with us a little while, but Lydia is our first ever graduate ambassador, our graduate brand executive. And this is part of our commitment to connecting graduates and every job seeker of any level with the right job. In the last 6 months, Lydia's visited 15 cities and gone to lots of careers fairs and graduate roadshows to really get a real insight into what graduates are looking for so we can adapt our approach. So she's going to give you some of the insights she's picked up on her travels.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just to give a brief summary on myself, I'm Lydia. I am the graduate brand executive for Reed. I'm a graduate myself. I graduated in 2014 in international relations and politics. And as many graduates do, I'm not doing anything in relation to my degree at the moment. So that's something I'll talk about in my next slide. So I have been to 18 universities so far, made impressions on about 10,000 students plus. We've had over 7,000 sign-ups. These are my top 3 most commonly shared insights. So these are things that I've actually gathered from speaking to the students I've engaged with on campus at different areas around the UK. So one of them was unrealistic expectations. So unrealistic expectations is talking about companies actually having an expectation on graduates. So sometimes what I've noticed is companies are placing a lot of emphasis on the individuals they want rather than representing the average graduate at the moment in time. So for example, a lot of companies advertise things such as minimum 2 years experience, but when you're coming out of a degree, the likelihood is you don't have that experience. So what students are finding is that they don't have the experience. A lot of companies are not providing the work experience and the training necessary. So it's not really reflective of the average graduate. The second one is no clear career paths. As I have said myself, I'm currently not doing anything in relation to my degree. But what you find is a lot of graduates don't exactly know what they want to do, and I think this was touched upon earlier in other presentations. The thing with this is graduates want to be in a position where there's more opportunity and variation. So roles that are most sorted or graduates go for most will be roles in which allows graduates to move about. So graduate schemes that allow people to go to different parts of the company, work with different industries, is roles in which graduates would like more often. So those roles which are a bit more rigid and a bit more confined are not the ones in which graduates are necessarily running or chasing after. The next one is all for nothing. So we mentioned earlier, I think on our site we had over 200,000 new registrations. So, and overall in the UK we had over 600,000 qualified degrees or qualified graduates. And the thing about that means it's quite competitive in terms of the market. So imagine trying to apply for loads of roles and a lot of companies do not get back to you. And it puts you in a position where you're kind of against the grain in the sense that you're looking for a role, you're looking for work, you're not hearing back from the companies that you're applying for. So it puts you in a situation whereby you're going to start sending your applications to multiple companies, and some of them you don't necessarily have the experience for, but you're just sending it because you want to hear something immediately or trying to get an opportunity somewhere from anywhere really. And so what I found is a lot of graduates are struggling to have the motivation to necessarily consistently apply for roles. So sometimes the application process is just really, really long, and it's actually putting graduates off. So what to expect when recruiting young adults. So first one is branding is key, but loyalty isn't. So what you'll find is many graduates go for brands that are universally recognized and an established brand. Why is just simple. Graduates want to go into a role that they trust and that they know. So companies that they know, they're more likely to go after. You can kind of see that being reflected in how people shop and buy in this day and age. So a lot of people look at recommendations and reviews before they go and purchase. And you can kind of see the same thing happening now. So what we also try to encourage is, for example, profile pages, so companies, graduates can look into the companies a little bit more and have better insight. You'll also hear a lot of companies now actually getting graduates who are on their program to talk about their role and to kind of give or sell the position that they've been in themselves to other graduates, to be more inviting and encouraging of their graduate scheme. So that's one of them. Loyalty isn't. So although branding is very, very, very significant in this particular demographic, they're not just going to stay in a position just because your brand is really recognized. If there is still a sense of unfulfillment, graduates are more likely to just move on to another position, especially if they're getting a better offering. So it's also about retaining your graduates. And one of the ways we should be looking to do that is looking at how you can constantly upskill, what type of career progression are you offering, and just being a bit more engaged with your graduates currently. Some of the things I think we ought to think about are looking at some of the methods we use to engage with graduates. Are they outdated? Could you be doing more? And how are you actually putting yourself and your brand in front of that audience in particular? And some of the things we can be using is, of course, social media. More for less. So this is where companies, as we can see just with some of the presentations mentioned earlier, there's been an increased pressure, and I believe that's gone through or been added also onto graduates, in the sense that graduates are being asked to do a bit more. And with this, what graduates are doing is biting back. So they want to add a little bit more pressure to your work. However, there's not necessarily always the support needed to fulfill the role that they're being asked to do, with the additional pressure being added to them. So such as skills and training, all things really, really necessary to try and keep the graduate motivated and within the role, to stay within the role. And being creative and utilizing your talents. So as new companies and as employers, this point really is that we need to be more forward-thinking, be creative, be bold, as mentioned earlier, be brave. So looking at ways in which you can reinvent new successes rather than repeating the same things that we've previously done. I think that's something that a lot of companies seem to be doing quite often, not trying to do something different and trying to wait for somebody else to lead the way rather than leading the way for themselves. So be a bit more innovative and forward-thinking. Also, when it talks about utilizing talent, there's a lot of talent probably that may be unnoticed and unsurfaced already within your company. Looking at how you can start resurfacing some of that talent. When I look at myself in particular, I started on the sales role, and because of the type of company we have, we can be quite, we can be very innovative, and we can come up with ideas, which I done, and from that it allowed me to get into a new position. So be able to offer opportunities that's not just restricted to the role that they may have applied for, creating an environment which graduates can actually put forth new ideas about how they would like to see the company progress and move forward is beneficial for the company as well as it is for the graduate. And essentially you will keep them more engaged because you allow them to feel that they have more value, and you're giving them a listening ear, which will go a very, very long way. So utilizing some of the talent that you do have, and it can also help to prevent some of the losses a lot of companies have. So just because a person is not particularly fitting this position, there may be other things that they could do in the company that you haven't thought about adding them to. So some of the suggestions we have done is thinking about focus groups, some initiatives that you can do in the company to start creating more insights from the graduates that you do have within your company, and how you can get some of their ideas and put it forward for the company.
I've got time to rattle through the last couple. Okay, cool. It's all right. So we're cool. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we're a couple of minutes over, so I'll just rush through this last few. Okay, so what marks out an employer of choice? So going back to, actually, Richard mentioned some research which SMRS and Read.co.uk commissioned a few months ago. So, quickly, 95% of Gen Z believe it's important for an employer to value corporate social responsibility. So we know that people are, this particular generation are very interested in things wider than just what the job is. So they're interested in what the organisation is about. 93% said it's important for employers to offer flexible working hours. This isn't shorter hours. This is just different ways of achieving their role, different ways of going about working. 99% believed it was important that an employer cared about their health and happiness. So they want to work for someone who cares about them. Okay, so finally, a couple of quotes from customers that we surveyed. Why hire a graduate? They said, one of them said that they're creative and energetic. The next said they're bright, keen, and mouldable talent. And the last one said it's a means to train and develop individuals we believe have the skills to be future leaders. So a whistle-stop tour of some of the research that we've done. But thank you very much for your time. We're over there later on if you've got any questions for us. Thank you.